Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the second video assessment Agony Uncle session. I'm Ben Williams, a chartered occupational psychologist that runs a firm called STEN10 that specialised in bespoke assessment design for recruitment and development. These sessions are designed to be an opportunity for you to ask me anything you would like to about assessment, whether you'd like to know more about personality questionnaires and reasoning tests, whether you'd like to talk about assessment centres, whether you'd like to go all geeky and start talking about data analysis and number crunching. I'm really happy to field all the questions that you may have. This is designed to be an interactive session, so I've got a couple of questions that people have submitted to me in advance, as well as answering questions live in the session itself. If you would like to ask a question, I'll just ask you to come off the mute so that you can ask the question. And then, but if you'd rather ask a question anonymously, please do just send me a message on LinkedIn and I will read it out and I won't mention your name if you would like. So you can see that I'm in a very salubrious setting for today's call. It looks like something out of Harry Potter, but what I'm going to now do is going to blow everyone's minds and show you where I actually am. 1, 2, 3. It's pretty similar. So this is the Institute of Directors. It's a really hip and happening place where all the cool kids hang out. So let's go over to some questions. So I know that Sampurna, when you joined just beforehand, you mentioned that you had a question. Would you like to come off mute and fire away?
Absolutely. So thanks for having us today, Ben. My question was basically around the thing that everyone is talking about at present, which is the applications of artificial general intelligence, including but not limited to ChatGPT, in the world of assessment and leadership development, which is kind of where I work. We started experimenting a little bit, but not officially using it for any kind of work. But as everyone else has been, I'm sure I've been playing around with it. I think the coming of GPT-4 and Google's Bard will probably make things even more interesting because it seems to be capable of, pretty high level reasoning at this point. Once you get to GPT-4. So yeah, I was just wondering generally, what are your thoughts on number one, potential applications, number two, potential ethical pitfalls, I guess, of using it? Those are the two main things on my mind at
Brilliant.
present. Yeah.
No, really, really good questions, Sampurna, and you're right. It's a real hot topic. So I think I'd probably talk about it from a couple of perspectives. I mean, you mentioned the risks. I think there are some risks and there are some opportunities, but I think you can also split it into occupational psychologists and assessment designers and HR practitioners that need to use these tools and the risks and opportunities there. Maybe I'll start out with some of the risks. So a couple of our clients at the moment that have highly competitive graduate schemes have said that they have noticed already a certain uniformity to applicants' responses when they're doing their cover letter. So they're if you put into ChatGPT, write me a cover letter for law firm X, highlighting how I meet the following values, and write it in a professional tone and all this kind of stuff, you end up with a really polished response. I was watching some debate recently about whether it's possible to detect whether a response has been written by ChatGPT, but the overwhelming consensus at the moment seems to be that those that claim that they can tell whether something's been written by ChatGPT are snake oil salesmen. Like it's not possible to tell whether it's been written by ChatGPT or not. So I would say that it's pretty much the death knell for the covering letter as being any kind of having any weight in a selection decision or the personal statement. It was something that even my 13-year-old son told me that it's like the ultimate cheat code for his homework, and he got it to write some really, really niche thing around environmental sustainability. Anyway, so that from a selection perspective, and that's one issue. Now, a way to counter the use of ChatGPT and AI in the use of written statements I guess there's a number of different perspectives. So one is that we wind the clock back and we go back to the era of in person or via camera supervision. So you watch people as they're completing their response, which is one way of doing it. There are other technologies that I've been made aware of that actually lock the screen that you're working on from using any other application while you're applying for a job. So you can't cut and paste the question into ChatGPT on that particular machine. Now, of course, you could do it on your mobile phone or in a second laptop and then type it in. So that's there is a way around it, but that's certainly one thing that people are working on. I think the other thing that people have expressed concern about is the use of it in answering reasoning questions. So can it answer a Watson-Glaser type test question? And the answer is that it does pretty well at that. And it actually does really well at writing Watson-Glaser type questions. And it's so scary because I got it to write one about the recognition of assumptions, and it did that nicely, and it came up with a question that was all right. And then I said, now write me one that measures one of the other aspects of reasoning that the Watson-Glaser test assesses. And without me even prompting it, it came up with inferences, like working out inferences. So it's just so vastly knowledgeable. So I think, but we park that for the moment and we talk about answering these questions. As a candidate, in order to be able to use ChatGPT, you would need to cut and paste the passage and then frame the question just so in the answer box. And when you think about how the tests have developed, they've all been normed based upon someone just reading it and then making an assumption. And I can hypothesize that it would take longer to cut and paste the passage and to come up with an appropriate prompt that's going to get you the right answer than it would do to actually just naturally know the right answer. It might be a case of a few seconds here and there, but it's going to have a knock-on effect for the norm score. I was thinking of something else there. My brain's gone slightly blank. Maybe I should put it to ChatGPT. What was I just thinking? So the other thing would be, for example, assessment centres. So a lot of assessment centres are being conducted remotely now, and they would have a written component quite often. Now, I still think that it isn't sufficiently advanced, ChatGPT, to be able to enter in an entire in-tray exercise, for example, and then to say, now compose a letter to Mr. Smith about the problem with manufacturing plant B. So I think we're safe on that for the moment. But shorter assessment center exercises, so things, I don't know, things like that, like your group exercise where it might say you've been given a knife, a compass, and a box of cornflakes, and you're stranded on Mars. How do you survive? And you then need to come up with a reasoned response, either in a group setting or in a one-to-one setting. That kind of thing, I think, is more fakeable. So what I would say is that you want to build in complexity, so something that it can't just read and you can't just cut and paste it. I think also thinking about embedding text as images within your virtual assessment center rather than as text, so you can't just highlight and cut and paste it, would be another way around, because then people would need to manually type out everything, which they just won't do. Of course, ChatGPT 4 now accepts visual inputs as well as text inputs, so it could well take a GIF or a JPEG and notice the text and read it anyway. So I don't know. So yeah, so I think that whilst it kills dead the personal statement, I think things like assessment centres are safe as long as they're sufficiently complex at the moment. And psychometrics, I think, are also relatively safe because of the timing element and the fact how they were originally normed. Then if you flip it around and say, right, as psychologists, how does AI impact what we do? So at STEM 10, we've gone through each stage of our typical work sample, from job analysis through to designing a competency model, through to designing test questions, through to evaluating them, and had to think about where ChatGPT could help. And I think our broad conclusion is that it's most useful in helping us to be creative. So it will give us a starter for 10 for group exercise ideas that might be set within the oil and gas industry. But what it won't do is produce all of the emails and the accompanying scoring guides and everything that might go with it. it can write interview questions that are pretty good, but to be able to match them precisely to the client competency model and to get the nuances they wanted, it always needs a human eye over it. So it's a good starter for 10, but it's typically not the finished article. I think I have asked it to do things like draft blog articles before, like most people are using it for, and that's good. I tell you one really interesting thing that it did that was impressive but wrong was when I was trying to find out about the old SHL tool called Images, which is a big 5 measure of personality that doesn't really, I don't think it's sold anymore. And each letter of Images was an acronym for different scales. So imaginative, methodical, not sure what the other ones are, but I couldn't remember them. So I looked on Google, couldn't help. I asked ChatGPT for what Images stood for, and it came up with a workable acronym based upon the big 5 factors of personality, but it wasn't the ones that SHL had chosen when they designed the tool. So it said, oh yes, Images stands for inventive. I can't remember what the M was now, but it was like, wow, that's really good, but it's not right. So it does need that human element. I've also asked it to produce referenced summaries of the research in an area before, and sometimes those references are spot on and sometimes they're made up or you can't find them anywhere. So it does need that sense check there as occupational psychologists. There is a session coming up at the ABP conference in May about the use of ChatGPT. I know Kate Young has started a group on LinkedIn about how, as occupational psychologists, we could use it. So I would encourage anyone to go along to that if you're not already planning to do so, and to join the LinkedIn group and to see what others are up to. That's a long answer to your question, Sampurna. What's that? That's about a quarter of an hour of me talking there. Thank you. Any follow-up questions, Sampurna?
Thank you. No, that was really helpful. I think it echoes a lot of what I've been thinking about in terms of and definitely gives me a lot more kind of food for thought as well. So definitely not using it as any kind of factual information, source of factual information, because it does in fact hallucinate.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really important one. But also, I think there's a bit of fear mongering at the moment that consultants are going to be out of jobs. And I think you've kind of assuage some of that, because you've said what I've been saying to people, which is that actually you need a human eye to look over all of that, because if you want higher level reasoning, and you want it to make be tailored to the client or to the particular situation, ChatGPT's generic responses really aren't going to cut it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it
I
would
know.
be interesting if you could talk a little bit more about where you see, how you see our jobs changing by deploying ChatGPT in strategic ways, how we can make our jobs easier, over and above some of the stuff you've mentioned in terms of drafting articles and starter for 10 for
Um,
group exercises and that kind of thing.
yeah. I mean, I tell you. So I mean, obviously, one option would be to use it to write test questions. I think it's a case of working out when it's a genuine benefit. So a member of my team was using it to write SJT questions, so situational judgment test questions, but it required so many revisions and tweaks to capture the competency that was being assessed. They said, "Oh, I could have just written this myself and save time," it was didn't really help. I think it can improve our rate of work in some areas, but I think it's a bit like if we were using anything else. So if I wanted to I don't know, submit a plan. So at the moment, I'm considering whether to build a shed at the bottom of my garden. Now, I need to get planning permission for that. So I could ask ChatGPT to write a submission to Chiltern District Council to that's guaranteed to have my planning permission accepted. I can do that, but I would 100% want an architect or someone who knows about this stuff to look at it first and to tailor it and to tweak it. And it's the same thing with, I think, like an interview question bank. So I think our clients, that they could enter in, please write me interview questions against the competency of teamwork, but they're going to want us to look over that and to verify it. It might mean that we can do things a bit quicker than before. And then it comes down to how, I guess, we price our work. So if we stick to the idea of our time being worth the number of hours we spend, then it could have an effect upon how much we can charge. If it's more a value-based sale, and if we say, well, look, actually what you're paying for are the decades, in my case, of experience that have got into that judgment, then it's a fixed cost, and that's that. I think that I've seen really like conflicting schools of thoughts online. Some people are saying, if a consultancy firm I was working with didn't use ChatGPT, that would actually make me look at them on an unfavorable way, because I think they're behind the times. And then other people saying, well, if someone said to me, yes, this was all written using ChatGPT, I'd be quite dismissive of that and thinking, well, I'm paying for your expertise. I'm not paying for a bot to write it. I could have done that myself. I think one of the things that is going to be an increasingly important skill across the board, whether you're a psychologist or whether you're anyone working in the industry, is going to be the interrogation of AI machines. So asking the right questions. I've seen some really interesting websites where you can purchase the prompts that you need to put in order to create a certain design language. So if I wanted to create a set of logos that of the company Sten 10, and I wanted them in a 70s funk vibe, then someone would provide me for about £2.50, £3 with a list of hashtags and words that I put in, and then I could have dozens of Sten 10 wearing flared trousers or whatever it is, and it would all look the same because those prompts are right. So I think being skilled at entering the right terms, I think right now is really important. I think in the future, as we get maybe voice-based interaction or graphical interaction where there are more pre-prepared prompts for you to use these AI systems, that might become less of a skill because you're more handheld through the process. But like yourself, Samperna, I think we are at the early stages, like everyone is, and we're still thinking about it and thinking, right, well, how can we best use this? Yeah, a way that can help.
Hi, Ben. I was also just thinking, I think it would be a great use of it to help us get sort of the nuts and bolts of things in place, and then use the time saved to be more creative and clever with what we're doing to, take things further in the field and go beyond what we're doing already. And that's how it could help us.
Yeah.
Taking over our jobs. And I think if we over rely on it just to produce the solution in itself, then we're all going to start producing the same uniform things that then applicants are going to be able to predict what's going to come their way. So we've definitely got to take it and then go beyond what it's giving us in some way.
That's a really good point, because if you think about, so if I spent 8 hours writing interview questions, but if I use ChatGPT, that might take 4 hours, but with a bit of proofreading and checking. If I've got those 4 hours spare, then I can think about, right, what else can we do around the candidate experience to make this more engaging? What else can I include in the introduction to the session that will put their mind at rest? How can I use the principles that I've spoken about elsewhere around behavioral science to put people's mind at ease, reduce cognitive dissonance, and make the whole selection process fairer? What can we do with the design to make the interview pack easier to use for assessors? So we can get our brains working about the really fun, exciting stuff, and we will still devote a portion of our time to writing questions, but actually we'll have that whole chunk of time freed up to use our noggins, as it were. Yeah, that's a really good point, Christine. Cool. Okay, thank you, Samperna. What I might do is, if it's okay, I'll just zip to one of the questions I received in advance on email, and then I will see if there's any other questions in the room. So one of the questions that was sent to me was around different types of validity and the reasons for seeking to prove different types of validity. So I think there's always a bit of a hierarchy when it comes to validity, and validity, just for those that are fresher to this topic, are: does a test or questionnaire do what it's supposed to do, or do what it's claimed to do? And if we start from the base level of validity, that would be what's called faith validity. So essentially blind faith in a tool. So I just believe that it works. There's no other evidence for it being the right way to go. So that might be things like handwriting analysis to some extent, although there's a caveat to that a little bit later. But I just believe that it works. There's no criterion validity that it predicts performance in 2 years' time. Or star signs, for example. I just believe that a Libras are great team players. So we wouldn't advise going down the faith validity route, although that you might need to do a job to persuade people away from that in times. Then you've got one step up, you've got face validity. Does it look right? And whilst face validity is not enough on its own, if something looks appropriate to a job and looks like a fair and objective assessment, then that's going to make it more likely that a candidate will accept it. So that example I gave earlier about being stranded on Mars with a box of cornflakes, that has poor face validity for most jobs, just about every job. So people might then protest if they're rejected from a job on the basis of inappropriate use of cornflakes in a zero-G environment versus being asked some verbal reasoning questions. So face validity is important. The next step up is content validity. So that's where you've established it via job analysis. You can say, yes, I've spoken to job holders, I've observed them, I've got detailed notes, I've got a competency model. I know that this is really important, and this test has been designed with that in mind. That's the lowest form of legally defensible validity in the UK. So I would say that's what you should be striving for at a minimum. The next level, or not it's the next level up, but it's another type, is construct validity. So that says this test or questionnaire that I've developed, does it really measure that psychological construct that's been around for years? So I talked about the images personality questionnaire earlier, which was a big 5 measure of personality. So what SHL did when they developed images was that they also got people to sit another well-established big 5 measure of personality, and they correlated the two, and they said, do people tend to agree with one another on these two tools? The advantage of doing that is that you can piggyback in a way off the other tool's success. So you can say, well, actually people answer our questionnaire, our big 5 questionnaire, very similarly to how they answer this other one. And this other one's got decades of experience showing how valuable it is, and you get more or less the same response. So construct validity is good for that reason. And then you have criterion validity. So this is the gold standard. So does it predict some criterion measure, like a hard measure, like amount of sales made, or tenure in role, or speed to promotion, or a softer measure like managers' ratings or customer satisfaction? And that can either be done at the same time, so concurrent validity, or it can be done trying to predict something in the future, so predictive validity. So concurrent, you take the 2 measures today and correlate them. Predictive, you take the test today, and then you'd look at job performance 6 months, a year down the line, and see if there's a link between the 2 of them. That's what you should be asking for from your test publishers or test providers when you're buying something off the shelf. If you're developing something bespoke, then that's something that you should have in your research plan. So you might start off with content validity and then say, and in 6 months' time, we're going to measure it against the following criteria. So hopefully that was helpful. I'll just see if there's any final questions. I don't know. I know that we've got Denham on the call, and we've got Christine and Katie, but any final questions? I've got 1 minute. No, I think that's that would be rather ambitious to fit that in 1 minute as well. So why don't we draw a close there for today? Thank you all very much for joining, and those of you that are listening to the recording, hope you found it useful, and hope to see you again next week. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks, Christine.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks, Imperna. Bye.
Bye.